Hey everyone, welcome to another Intro to HTML video. In this video, we're going to talk about positioning. Positioning involves the position property in CSS. It allows us to move things around the page and make things display in ways that don't fit the normal flow of an HTML document as we've seen thus far. In order to get ready for this video, I want you to do a few things. First, get a blank HTML document with the valid markup with doc type and head and title and all that kind of stuff. And then in the body, I want you to get a wrapper. So div ID wrapper. And then 3 divs inside of it. Div ID top, div ID middle, and div ID bottom. I'll give you a second to copy this HTML. So why don't you pause the video, and when you come back, we'll move on to the CSS. All right, welcome back. Let's take a look at the CSS. Here's how we're going to start. We're going to start by giving the body a background color. I chose dark gray. You can choose whatever you want. Wrapper is going to be width of 85%. Background color is something that's going to contrast the background color of the body. Set the margins to 0 top and bottom, auto left and right. Padding 2%, and position, we'll take the position out of there for now. So don't worry about putting position in there right now. Then we're going to select top, middle, and bottom in a comma-separated list. And as you know, when you do a comma-separated list of selectors, it's going to be a style rule that will affect all 3 of those. So what I'm doing is I'm going to give them all some settings, some presettings for background color, height, width, and margin. So I'm going to set the height to 150 pixels, width to 150 pixels, and then margin to 2%, background color to red. I'm going to save it. We'll take a look at it in the browser. And there you have it. Okay, this is the starting point. This is what we're going to work with. And then we're going to move these things around the page using position. Let's start just talking about the position attribute, or pardon me, position property. Position. I'm going to start with relative. Position relative. Position relative means that we are going to position something relative to its default starting location in the flow of the document. Save it. Take a look at it in the browser, and no difference. Position relative on its own doesn't do anything. What you need to do is you need to add some things to it. Let's try this. Position relative, and we'll do left 300 pixels. Refresh it in the browser, and the middle one shifts over by 300 pixels. Okay? So the way it works is it looks at the starting place, where that element should be within the document. So it should be right here. And its left side should be right here in the document. And what that left 300 pixels does is it shifts that over 300 pixels from its starting location. The one thing about position relative that's very important is that it doesn't break the flow of the document. It doesn't take this element out of the flow of the document. It just moves it somewhere else and then keeps its spot open. Okay? So the top and bottom stay where they should be, but the middle one moves out of its place but keeps its space open. Let's see what happens when we set this to absolute. Position absolute, save it, refresh it. Well, that's kind of weird. Which one is middle, which one is top, and which one is bottom? Well, this one is top, this one is bottom, and this one is middle. You'll notice that that space that was there for relative is now gone. Top and bottom are stacked vertically, and they have their flow. Middle is taken out of the flow of the document and shifted over 300 pixels from its starting location. Okay, so relative saves a space. It keeps that space where the item initially was, but it just moves it over a little bit. That's relative positioning. It positions an element relative to its default position. Now let's take a look at some of the other things here. We did left. Let's see what happens when we do top. I'm going to do top 0. Save it. Refresh it. And you'll notice it does not move down at all. That's saying 0 pixels from its current position. Let's see what happens when we do top 25 pixels. It moves it down 25 pixels. So its default starting top position was right here. It moves down 25 pixels to right here. Let's see what happens when we do bottom. I'm going to take top out of there. And I'll do 0. Save it. Refresh it. And once again, it doesn't move at all from its starting position. 0 starting position is right here, just like with top. Now I'll see what happens when I do bottom 75 pixels. Save it. It moved it up by 75 pixels. So it pushes it away 75 pixels away from its starting position. This is starting position. This is 75 pixels away. So it moves it upward. What do you think will happen if we do right? I'm going to take left out of here, and I'm going to go right 0. Save it. And it's just back in its default position, right? If I do right 75 pixels, what do you think it's going to do? Shove it to the right? Wrong. It moves it from the right, so its right side is right here, and it moves it over 75 pixels. Remember, left shoved it over to the right, right shoves it over to the left. So here's its starting position, here's 75 pixels over. So that's how the top, bottom, left, and right work with relative positioning. Okay, I'm going to keep middle as it is. Now let's take a look at position absolute. Position absolute. And I'm going to go absolute 0, or top. Now I'm going to do bottom 0. Save it. Refresh it in the browser. Well, what happened there? It took bottom out of the flow of the document and then put it all the way down at the bottom. Okay, I'm going to take this, hang on, I'm going to switch this up a little bit. Take relative out of wrapper. There we go. That's what I wanted to see. It moved bottom all the way down to the very bottom of the browser. Absolute positioning, position absolute, is going to position an element absolutely based on some pixel dimensions or percentages within the browser window. So if I want to go all the way down to the bottom of the browser, I'll do bottom 0. If I want to go all the way to the bottom right corner, bottom 0, right 0. And it goes all the way to the bottom right corner. And you might say, that's not all the way in the bottom right corner. There's a little space here on the edge. Bottom and right edges, there's a space. Yeah, there is. So that space is actually the margin around my divs. Remember I put margins around there? Well, when positioning, margins are taken into account. When you're positioning things, you're positioning the whole box. Margins, border, padding, height and width, and content. All right? So if I wanted to go all the way down in the lower right-hand corner with no space there, I need to take out the margins. So I'll go to top, middle, bottom, and take out the 2% margin, and it'll go all the way down to the bottom. See that? If I want to go all the way to the top, I could do top 0. It's going to go all the way to the top of the browser. Okay? You might say, well, what if I want to position it absolutely within some sort of container? Let's say you've got a logo that you want to place absolutely in the center and slightly high in my H1. Pardon me, in my header. Well, you could do that. And you don't have to think about it being positioned absolutely within the page. We can position things absolutely within a containing element. In order to do that, the containing element has to set position to relative. So let's take a look at the HTML here. Bottom is nested inside of wrapper, so that we would say wrapper is the containing element. If I want to position this absolutely within the wrapper, within its containing element, I have to set wrapper's position to relative. You actually saw that. That was what I had it set up as to start with. Wrapper, position, relative. Save it and refresh it. And now you'll see that this is positioned absolutely within the wrapper. So it's up in the upper right-hand corner of the wrapper. Now, what if I wanted to place it in the center? Let's go bottom is going to be positioned right, and let's try 50%. That's going to put it's going to put the right-hand side right at 50%. Okay? And then I could do top 50%. It's going to put the top right at 50%. Okay? Now, if I wanted to get it absolutely in the center, so the center of this is on the center of this, I'm going to have to do a little bit of careful calculations to get my percentages down right. But that's how you move things around, position them absolutely and relatively within a document. Now, the big important thing about absolute positioning is that you'll notice that the wrapper has collapsed. The wrapper doesn't recognize that the bottom is still there. If I set this to relative, you may recall that the document will leave space for the original position. See, the original position was right here. Now my div is off the page because I set positions, 50% and 50%, and that puts it way off the page. But what I'm saying here is it left some space for where the bottom would be. Okay, I'm going to put this to top 2% and right 2%, so it'll still show up. And you can see that there's still space for my bottom element here. Let's say if I move the top one, I'm going to move the top one, positioning it absolutely. I'm going to set it at left at 300 pixels. And you'll see that the div, the wrapper, will collapse and it'll move the top over to the right. And then middle and bottom shift up. Okay? So that's a little bit about positioning. Absolute positioning and relative positioning. We're going to look at this more in depth as we move on in some other videos. I'm going to use some positioning in another video to position something like a logo within my design. Thanks for watching.